Hi guys, and welcome to Thankful Thursdays again with myself, Kel, and also Rachel. So for some reason I look completely washed out on camera this week, but never mind. You'll probably have noticed by now that we have a new rotation at the moment, which Sarah has come up with, and I believe it's taken from a DBT book. Now DBT is not something that I have any personal experience of. But the topic that Rachel and I have been asked to look at for today is about mindfulness in challenge, looking at facing your challenges through mindfulness. And mindfulness is something that I do adopt some elements of in terms of my coping mechanisms, and it's something that I've looked at quite recently really. So mindfulness basically is a Buddhist practice, and I imagine that this week will be quite interesting in terms of the videos created from this, because I think that unless you're really heavily into it, it's kind of open to interpretation and you can kind of pick what works for you, and I think it'll be an interesting week. So what does mindfulness mean to me? So there's that old phrase, feel the fear and do it anyway, and that's pretty much what mindfulness means to me. And what that means in practice really is that you're self-aware, that you're non-judgmental in that awareness, and that you're present in the moment. So I think probably an example is going to be the best way for me to explain this. I have quite a recent example that could work quite well of when I've used mindfulness as a way to cope, and it's not directly related to an eating disorder behaviour, but I think it'll make it a little easier to understand. So a couple of days ago I had to make a journey right across the country, and by myself, and this isn't something that I'd done before. I'd usually take somebody with me, and I wouldn't have to deal with it by myself. But I'd been given an opportunity to go and do some volunteer work, and nobody was able to go, and I decided that I wanted to go. I wanted to just get on with that. I didn't want to be putting my life on hold because of an anxiety I have. So I guess I was agreeing to feel the fear and do it anyway. So what happened was I needed to make this really long train journey, and so I got to the train station in the morning, and here comes the fear. As soon as I got to the train station, it was really busy, and I started panicking, and I started feeding my worry and my assumption that something was going to go wrong and I was going to get on the wrong train or get lost or something bad was going to happen. And I started getting overwhelmed and panicking, and my anxiety was rising and rising, and I started crying. And what I wanted to do at that point was turn around and go back home and think, okay, at least I tried, it's fine. But I knew I couldn't do that, and how I coped with the situation was through at least my interpretation of mindfulness. So what I did was I was on the train, and I think the first point of my mindfulness is realising the situation at that moment, and you have to remind yourself, at least I have to remind myself, to stop and step back. And I don't necessarily mean literally, because that's not always possible, but I realised I was getting overwhelmed and I was panicking and I was going to avoid the situation, and I was like, okay Kel, just stop. And I sat down on the train in tears and anxiety, and I thought, okay, calm yourself down. So how did I do that? I basically had to just accept the situation and in all the fears that there were. So I'm thinking, okay, all of these things can go wrong, how am I feeling? And I stopped and I listened to my body about what it was telling me. It was telling me to run, and I was having, all the signs of anxiety, like my heart was beating really hard, and I was shaking, and I had tears and everything. And I kind of stopped and listened to my body's concern about that. And then I tried to be aware of my surroundings as well. So I stopped and I looked around me, and I looked at the other people on the train, and I kind of tried to feel the atmosphere. Everybody else wasn't panicking like I was. And that helped me because I became aware of my situation and I wasn't allowing it to go out of all proportion. I was acknowledging my own fears, my own anxieties, and I wasn't running away from them. I was sitting with them. I was saying, okay, hi anxiety, really don't want you to be here by now, but I'm acknowledging that you exist. And then I was looking around me at the situation and saying, look, this is the rest of the situation, and trying to weigh up both sides of it. So not beating myself up for being anxious, but also trying to show myself at the same time that there was, most people around me were quite calm and weren't afraid of the situation. And I just kind of sat with that, and I sat with my emotions, and I let myself cry, and I slowly calmed down as I sort of accepted that what I was going to do was I was going to go on this journey. I was going to sit with this discomfort, and I was going to go. And slowly I calmed down, and out the other side of this journey, what I'd done was I'd sat with that fear, and I'd gone through the anxiety instead of running from it, and I was at my destination, and the world hadn't fallen apart. And I have yet to do this again because this was only a couple of days ago, but I suspect that next time I find myself in that situation it'll be a little easier, and it'll still be necessary for me to stop myself and say, okay, we're getting overwhelmed, listen to your body, listen to your environment, and it's easy to judge yourself and beat yourself up, and it's good to remind yourself, okay, it's okay to feel how you're feeling, and listening to what you're feeling, being self-aware of it, but also not running from it, so sitting and travelling through it. And that self-awareness got me through the day, and by the time I got to my destination I had nowhere near the same level of anxiety, and my journey home was much easier because I felt reassured that I'd sat with that fear and I'd coped and the world hadn't fallen apart. And I suppose that's the easiest way I could think to explain how mindfulness works in my experience, and I suppose you guys are going to want to know how that works in terms of eating disorder. And I suppose you could apply exactly the same thing to, for example, eating. And you could sit down with your food and you can stop and you can listen to your anxieties and your fear and just be in that moment. Don't run from it, don't throw your plate and run screaming, but just sit with the emotion. You might cry, you might shake, you might feel sick, but just sit with it and face the challenge, being completely aware of everything. Okay, what does this physically feel like? What does this emotionally feel like? How is my body reacting to this? How are other people around me? What exactly is going on? I think a lot of us with eating disorders worry about, how now is going to impact on the future. So we're thinking, if we eat this meal, I'm going to suddenly balloon into an elephant. But you can sit with this food, and it's just this food. That's all it is. It's just this food, and you can deal with your anxiety by sitting with it and not avoiding it, and acknowledging how you feel and being self-aware and non-judgmental to yourself and your needs. So I feel like I have completely rambled, and I know I say that in nearly every video, and I have absolutely no idea if this has made any sense, but mindfulness is something that I find really helpful in terms of moving forward, because like I said, it enabled me to go on this journey, and I didn't ignore my feelings. I didn't tell myself, oh, you shouldn't be feeling like this, which just makes it worse. I just sit with it and experience it, and over time you kind of develop sort of an acceptance for your emotions. And I've talked in other videos about how I don't consider emotions to be good or bad, and I guess that's part of this really, in that I'll sit with my emotion, whatever it is. I mean, my friends know me quite well for crying about random things, which isn't something I would have done when I was ill. But I just go with it and feel it, and that's where I'm at, because you can't live in the future because you're not there yet. All you can live with is what you've got right now, and stopping and listening to the situation that you're in is actually quite the opposite to what it seems. It seems like it could be absolutely terrifying, but I actually think that if I stop and acknowledge my situation and be self-aware about it, that it isn't as bad as I think it is, if you see what I mean. When you actually stop and listen instead of running from it, it isn't as scary and as horrible as it might magazine. So I hope this waffle has been of some use to somebody. I hope you're all well, and I'll see you in the video next week. Take care guys. Bye.